no more than 1 minute's length. And we'll simply go from Kevin and down that way. All right, Kevin, you may begin.
I'm Kevin Tyler. I'm running for president because I believe that there's a lot of issues that face the country that we can really solve. Maybe not so much with government interference, but by reducing government interference with the everyday lives of the people, and by stimulating the economy and reducing the stress of administration on things such as education, on the prison system, and yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
All right.
Leo?
My name is Leonardo Porter. I support the gun laws, flat taxes. I believe that Obamacare should be dismantled and reconstructed to allow private companies to prosper without government help. I believe that education should take a new look into the Common Core and concentrate more on the time in classes and how we look at students.
Thank you, Leo. Gunnar?
Hello, my name is Gunnar Stone. I'm also running for the United States presidency here. There are some things that I think need to be brought to attention, such as ISIS is obviously one of those big problems that we need to address here in the United States. They're threatening our sovereignty and our citizens here, and I think that that's a really big problem. Gun control is another big topic that I think needs to be discussed. Obviously, there are some problems, but I think that those can just be worked around through some discussion. I also believe that education needs to be looked at because, as we all know, being students here, Common Core doesn't always work for every single situation in the school districts. So I think that that needs to be looked at as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Conrad?
Hello, my name is Conrad Campbell, and I firmly believe that the Constitution is one of the most important documents that we have. Because no man, no woman, no president or king has made this document. But this document has given us the people, we the people, to build a more perfect union. The reason why this country is so great is we have the people govern this government. No king, no president takes control of this government and makes the laws. We make the laws, and I believe we should keep that power within the people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So our first question, please raise your hand if you would like to speak. We're going to set the timer at 1 minute per response. So this goes out to everyone. Every candidate says they're going to break the stranglehold of special interests in Washington. If nobody has been able to do it before, why do you think you would? Kevin?
I think that I could work together with Congress and with other entities to pass an amendment that would bring about short term limits, which would significantly reduce the impact of special interests on congressional and presidential decisions, because all the politicians would be fresh faces. So it would be harder and less, there would be less incentive for special interests to attempt to buy out politicians and continue the cycle of corruption.
So you mentioned lessening or putting a limit on the amount of time that a congressperson or senator would be able to serve, but that would require a constitutional amendment. Do you think you could get that through a Congress?
I think that by working together with the Congress, it could happen.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to speak to that point? Go ahead, Gunnar.
Okay, obviously special interest groups are a big problem, as we've learned about in this class, corrupting our politicians and making them add things to bills that they shouldn't. Those people that are getting corrupted, they were voted in by people, So here's the thing. If you don't want a corrupted politician in, you should weed out those that you think, would be easily swayed by these special interest groups and maybe not vote those people in. Now, obviously, it's still a problem that can be unavoidable, right? Everybody, gets a little swayed by money or gifts. So maybe a counter to this would be to have someone that maybe checks, keeps the congressman or senator on their toes and make sure that they are doing what they should be doing and not anything shady, you know what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you, Gunnar. Anyone else want to speak to this point? Okay, moving along. Ms. Crawford?
The people elect representatives to serve them and to enforce the laws. And currently, with the recent death of Anthony Scalia, what would you say about the current situation where the Congress is basically saying that regardless of who is put forward, they will block the current lame duck president's ability to nominate a person? Do you think that that's actually kind of an obstruction of justice?
Yes, I absolutely do believe that is an obstruction of justice. So if you look at Scalia and look at all the great things he did, he was by the book, by the Constitution. There's nowhere in the Constitution where it says to delay, an appointment just because a party's not in there. Yeah, even though it's probably going to be by a Democratic president, but still, we have to keep justice through our Constitution. It is one of the most important documents we have, and it's laid the great framework. If we start adding these absurd rules just because someone is different or whatever, that's the complete opposite of a democracy.
I believe that there is precedent for denying a judge from being elected during a president's last term. Famously, the Democrats did in 2007 to George Bush, and in 1960, the Democrats also passed a resolution to do the same thing. So traditionally, if a person was elected, that would be the first time in 100 years that happened, or not elected but nominated, in the last year of a candidate's office. Now, the Senate has the responsibility to view and discuss and debate any candidate that is put forward, but they are not obligated by law to approve of that person, and in fact, the Constitution specifically says that they can reject the person.
But do you think that their outright statement that they wouldn't pass anyone at all is them basically?
I think that's unfair, but it's not unfounded, and it's not like baseless.
Yeah, going off of what Kevin said, they have, even though it's unfair that they aren't giving this candidate a chance, it is still within their power to deny approval, or even like looking at the candidate that Obama has put forward. Going back to the question earlier, Obama does have the constitutional right to propose a judicial Supreme Court justice, and the legislative branch does have the power to look over this. But going back to what Kevin said again, it's been within it's traditional not to do it within the last term of a presidency, and they do have the power to deny his approval.
I don't believe tradition should be the way that we govern the people. We have this Constitution that explicitly has checks and balances, right? So when the president looks for and tries to pick a new justiciar, then the Senate will look and see if this person will uphold the Constitution. And that's who the person should be based on, not because he's a Democrat or Republican, but should be based upon will he uphold the Constitution in these court cases.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I agree that with that, it's within the checks and balances of the Constitution for the Senate to do what they're doing, because it's controlled by a majority of people who probably would not agree with the views of the next court nominee. So unless Obama nominated someone who was a well-respected constitutional lawyer that a lot of people can agree with, the Senate's not going to do it, and it's totally within their power to do that.
Okay, so I have a question posed from Twitter. This is from Larry, and he asks...
Anonymous much?
Larry's question is, America's immigration policy has been broken for years now, with approximately 12 million people living in the shadows. Some of our mayors of some of our country's largest cities, such as San Francisco, providing sanctuary for illegals. What is your proposal to fix our broken immigration system? Go ahead, Gunnar.
I just think that we need to enforce the laws that we already have, because we already have laws that say to send illegal immigrants back. We're just not enforcing them. We already have laws that say they're not supposed to get education, they're not supposed to get jobs without their proper papers and such. But they are doing those things anyway. And because they know that they can get away with doing these things illegally, they come to our country because, they know that they can get away with it illegally. If they knew that if they came here illegally, if they knew that they couldn't get a job, if they knew that their children couldn't get education or health care, then they wouldn't come in the first place. And I just think that we need to enforce the laws that we already have.
Okay, thank you, Gunnar. Thank you, Gunnar. Leo.
Well, I don't think that the fight should be taken while they're already inside the United States. I think it should be taken to the borders. We should be giving money to the border control and adding more units, more military force there to allow people that want to come to the U.S. come, but doing it illegally, they'll be able to get stopped. You know.
So what do you suppose we do with the 13 million people who are already here?
Well, the people who are here already, they're taking our jobs, and they're getting paid less because of not having papers. So we need to be able to find out what businesses are doing this and stop them.
Would you propose amnesty for those 12 million people who are already here?
Yes.
Go ahead.
He just said that the government should be forcing businesses to stop, like, considering who they're hiring. I think instead of increasing federal oversight of businesses and regulations, that a better option would be to completely shut down immigration in general, both legal and illegal. Because when we're talking about illegal immigrants, on average, the United States government loses $40,000 a year in welfare and subsidies and what have you. So a better thing to do than stopping businesses from hiring legal immigrants is to make sure that we're not spending all that money on these people by getting them into positions where they can care for themselves. An option that I've thought about a lot is having illegal immigrants who want to stay in the United States serve in the military and then have them fast-tracked to citizenship that way. And then from there, because the military offers a lot of training and skills and jobs, then they can go from there to the workforce and be in the same position that regular American citizens are. And this would it would help the economy, and it would decrease the amount of federal oversight required for all these different programs.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, I actually think that's a terrible idea to put immigrants into our armed forces, because they have the potential of not being loyal to our country, and they'd be exposed to, you know, things that could threaten our national security. And we're not just talking about, you know, Mexico here. We're talking about all immigrants, right, from all countries, and there's just no way to sort out which ones would be potentially harmful to serve in our military and which ones wouldn't.
So what would you say to someone even your age who was brought here as a child at maybe age 3? Many of these people actually grew up not even realizing they weren't citizens, and some of them have, for example, been used to take care of brothers and sisters. They weren't ever schooled because the parents were afraid. What would you say to a 17-year-old who's illegal, has no one in Mexico, has no skills, and yet was brought here before they could have a say in it? What do we do with that individual?
Okay, well, going back to what I said earlier, I wasn't just applying this to Mexico, I was applying this to all countries, you know. We have pretty, you know, close ties with Mexico, other than, you know, the drug cartels and, you know, all that nasty stuff down there. But it's kind of like we're not fighting them really right now, so I wouldn't really see a threat to that case that you just proposed there. But, you know, there would have to be a lot more, I guess, talk about this potential system of.
So some pathway to citizenship.
Yeah.
Going kind of off of that, we have these, you know, all these immigrants in here that are illegal, and we have a couple options. Either we can just throw them out, or we can make them citizens. If we throw them out and spend all that money, it's just going to raise up taxes and everything. But what we can do is make it easier for them to become citizenships. If we make sure they haven't broken any laws, and make sure we check for 5 years to make sure they still haven't broken any of these laws, and I have no problem keeping these hardworking, soon-to-be Americans to help bring up our working class.
Okay, when you say that they haven't broken any laws, I would consider coming to the country illegally and doing, you know, stealing jobs away from Americans and getting free, you know, education and all that. That seems kind of illegal to me. So when you say that they haven't committed any crimes here,
I'd just like to counter that illegal immigrants don't actually steal jobs. What they do is they prevent businesses from creating more jobs because of how it affects the wages that companies get. So when you talk about illegal immigrants stealing jobs, it's simply not the case. And like I said earlier, a better way, because, you know, to be part of the military, you have to go undergo significant background checks and stuff like that, so that they're sure that you're not going to, like, turn on them, and you have to swear an oath to uphold the Constitution. So I honestly think that's the best way to give people a track to citizenship, because then they can get those skills that they need to be part of the workforce and not be detrimental to businesses by decreasing the wages they're paying.
Okay, so again, let's just take a scenario where you're living in your house and a random guy just comes up to your door. You don't know anything about him, and he says he's from another country. How are you supposed to do a background check on a guy you know nothing about? So, and if he says, okay, I swear to follow all rules of your house, and so can I live here? Like, an oath doesn't mean much. If they are going to pose a threat to the country, they could just lie. Oaths, really, you can take them with a grain of salt.
I have a question for all of you. Our military leads the largest and most advanced military in the world at the cost of $811 billion a year. 1.25 times the amount spent on the rest of the world's military combined. Do you believe that offense is the best defense, or would you change the amount that we spend in our military budget? Go ahead, Kevin.
I believe that we don't need to be bothering ourselves with wars in all these foreign countries. It's not fiscally responsible, and it costs the lives of thousands of American citizens. So when we're talking about this issue, we need to think, what can we do that, because our military is the strongest and it's the most advanced. Well, we want to keep it that way so that when we come and bring all these people home, we don't have to send them out again. So I think a better option for military spending would be to focus on homeland defenses, such as a missile defense system, things like that, so that we can be sure and safe in our country without interfering in other countries' affairs.
Okay.
I'd like to disagree in that aspect. One, the American military provides a career for a lot of Americans to be able to at least get it started and be able to go to college or be able to pursue that career into it. Another thing I'd like to point out is foreign policy, is that if we look to a lot of our wars, we're in a lot of conflicts when it seems to be when there's oppression of freedom. And I looked back to my own history tree where I see that I had family on the side of the Berlin Wall. And I always thank America every day that we were able to stop the communist advancement in several other countries and eventually tear down that wall. And that's one of the things why I love America so much, is that not only do we protect ourselves, but we're willing to send young men who are already ready to volunteer to sacrifice their life for the greatest glory that there ever is, to help others retain that freedom.
Okay.
I don't know, about the whole military spending thing, I feel pretty safe right now. I don't feel like, someone could bomb this. I probably shouldn't say that. Anywho, I feel pretty safe where I am right now, so I feel that, like, the spending that we're doing, if you guys feel safe, it's...
But if you feel safe, does that mean you're actually safe?
Well, are you? How long have you been alive, Conrad? Your whole life? Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I want to reject on Kevin's statement here, playing a defense here. I believe that we should be showing an aggressive force so that no one thinks that we're like, okay, they're just a little person, we're just gonna attack them, and everyone can band together and attack us. But if we're showing a giant force and they're like, okay, we don't want to mess with that guy, he's just like too big for us, then...
And we look at Europe right now, we see Putin trying to advance his power, right? We're really the only country that can stop that. And I feel that if we let down our military, downgrade it, that Putin's going to realize that and start advancing, right? We see he's already advancing in the Middle East, and he's going through Europe. And so we have to be a strong force to prevent that.
Okay.
If the European people are willing to let Putin encroach upon them, then you should let the European people let Putin encroach upon them. It's not our business to be there because they're not the American people. Our first interest is protecting ourselves.
What would be your response to the stealth fighters that were scrambled because for South and North Korea, we had 4 stealth fighters just in the last 24 hours.
I was not aware of that, but nonetheless, I think that North Korea is China's problem. I believe North Korea is China's problem, and if China has any interest in keeping North Korea on a leash, China should be the one controlling them. If North Korea aggresses against United States interests, then the United States should be able to go full force against North Korea and tell them that we're not to be messed with. But we shouldn't be policing the world trying to jump on every little infraction and making up infractions so that we can go to war in places like we did in Vietnam, like we did in the Middle East.
But do we have a responsibility to intervene when there's mass genocide?
I believe that in cases like that, like against Nazi Germany, that was reasonable, and they were threatening our interests and the interests of humanity as a whole. But like in the case of the Middle East, you know, the number one cited reason for terrorism is the presence of United States troops in their country, especially Syria.
Okay, I wouldn't really see us right now as being the world's police like we were, you know, back in FDR's time, but rather I like keeping allies. You know, if we're in trouble, it's nice if other countries come and help us out. So in order to keep that ally bondage, you know, maybe it's a good idea to help, you know, maybe Europe out, because we've been friendly over the past long while.
I like to point out the comment how it's not our problem. I think it very is much our problem. If we look at the rise of Nazi Germany, right? People said that's not our problem, we don't have to worry about it. And look what happened, it caused a war, right? We can't sit there and let Putin come in, take over Europe, and who's next? It's going to be us. And yes, I understand we shouldn't be policing the world, but we should prevent terrorism or these governments trying to take over the world, because we are a community, right? That's why we have the UN. That's why I fully support this UN, so that we can be a community and guard the world together.
Okay, well, let's move on. The Second Amendment of the United States Bill of Rights clearly says that the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. However, with gun violence increasing drastically in years, how would you balance Second Amendment rights and public safety? Kevin?
Increase access to mental health institutions. A big reason or a big cause that people say of a lot of people who commit mass shootings is they're mentally ill. And so they say, have a mental background check. Well, that's unethical because that's labeling. If you've ever taken a psychology class, they talked about that, and that's why mental institutions were shut down, is because it's unethical to label people. And the same thing applies there. But by increasing access for treatment and for people to be able to get the care that they need for their mental issues, I think that significant issues like mass shootings would decrease.
What would you say on the instance, you say background checks for mental health, right? Well, say you bought a gun already, you have the background check, and you have it in your closet. A tragic event happens to you, and your mental health just spirals out of control, and you just grab the gun and just go out and just start shooting everybody.
So you're in favor of mental background checks then?
No, I'm saying that
There's no way to prevent.
there's no way to prevent it.
No, there's no way to
At
prevent
any time, you can lose your mental health.
In the words of the lead singer of Eagles of Death Metal, until no one has guns, everybody needs guns. And I think that because it's impossible to get rid of guns, everyone should have a gun. And so if a person whose mental health spirals out of control, it's up to the people around them to protect themselves and their interests and prevent that person from causing significant harm.
Okay, thank you. Conrad?
Yes, I don't believe that it's just mental disability. Yes, there are some cases where it has inflicted, but I believe it's the irresponsibility of owning a gun. I believe that we should actually have training for people that want to buy a gun, to make sure you know how to use it, to make sure you have a locker to hold your gun, to make sure it doesn't get into the hands of children. We have to make sure that you know what you're doing with this gun, and you're not going to use it for ill purposes.
Okay.
All right, if I'm a bad guy, I'll take that class. I'll fake being all responsible with a gun. I'll get that gun. I don't really see that as being a way of preventing anything. And like, what if you lose it? What if it gets stolen? It's just, there's too many ill, side effects to this whole gun regulation business.
Well, I think his proposal about the idea that increased access to mental health, because if you look at the statistics, especially in the United States with the mass shootings, many of the people were actually recognized, especially the young people, as people who had significant issues with their mental health. And there were either no resources or someone neglected it. On that note, as young people going forward, do you think that, you say you want to dismantle healthcare, where do you stand with your proposal? What would you do with healthcare?
So what I propose for healthcare is that, it's a great idea that everyone has health insurance, but there's a lot of people, especially the higher class, that already have insurance, and now we're placing a burden on them where they not only have to be taxed, but they have to go with Medicare and everything. And I believe that we should focus more towards privatizing, and not only that, but focus on the people who don't have it. Because there's a lot of people that already have it and they're being affected by this. And another thing I look at is it taxes a lot of small businesses. There's been so many small businesses that have been downsized or been collapsed because of this Obamacare is placing way too much taxes on these workers.
Okay, you actually brought up a really good point with the whole government-funded asylums. I don't know what
Sanctuary
else.
cities.
What?
No, it would be mental health asylums,
Yeah.
and I
Oh,
don't
I'm
think they
sorry.
should be government funded.
Well, here's the thing. It's in everyone's best interest not to have a crazy person on the street. Like, here's the thing. Yeah, government healthcare in general, like, it doesn't benefit you or anyone else in this room if Bob Joe gets free, leg surgery, all right? It doesn't benefit anyone here. But what does benefit everyone here is if we get a crazy guy the treatment he needs so that he doesn't do crazy things to the people that you know or that you love.
Okay, I'd like to switch gears one more time. And I'm going to ask a question, and I simply want a yes or no, and we're just going to go down the line. Is climate change man-made, Kevin? Or is climate change due to man-made causes?
I can't say yes or no to that question. I've researched too much into it specifically for that reason, and my answer is maybe.
Yeah?
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Okay. The problems of inequity, inequality, and stagnant wages have been developing over the last few decades through Democratic and Republican administrations. So what fundamentally are we doing wrong?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure, absolutely. So the question is, the problems of inequality and stagnant wages have developed over the last few decades through both Democratic and Republican administrations. So what fundamentally are we doing wrong?
As I kind of look towards it as my fundamental belief, it doesn't matter who you are or what you do or who your family is, but it matters about how much effort you put into your job, how much effort you're willing to go that one extra mile. It should be based upon how much you earn. I noticed with a lot of companies where you have someone who's been in there for like 60 years but doesn't do anything, right, is getting paid with all these benefits, in reality is just preventing the progress of that company or whatever that is.
I was researching this, and according to a study done by the Cato Institute, one of the reasons that the minimum wage, for example, has been so stagnant throughout a significant number of administrations is because of immigration, both legal and illegal. Like I mentioned earlier, immigration immigrants don't steal jobs from American citizens. They prevent businesses from creating them because they work for lower wages. And they work for lower wages because they don't know that they can get higher wages. So they do that, and then the overall wages of basically everything goes down. There's a significant correlation in that manner. So what you would want to do then is not like have any government mandates on those things, because mandating an increased minimum wage, for example, would put businesses, they would get rid of the jobs that they're already not making, if you know what I'm saying.
Okay. How about, would any of the candidates do anything for the growing wage gap between the sexes?
Okay, well, just a little wisdom on that. I personally, I wouldn't know why any business, manager, boss, whatever, why anyone would hire a man if he would have to pay that man more money than he would have to pay that woman. I think another problem in it is that maybe the women are more susceptible to accepting a lower wage. Maybe the boss is more susceptible to asking, for a lower wage for the women, and she's okay with it, asking a lower wage for the guy, and he's not okay with it. There's so many different variables that can explain why that happens, but I think that that's not up to the government to really do. I think it's up to the individuals to say, no, I won't work for that, or yes, I will.
Connor?
I thought it was kind of funny to roll guys here, but to bring it to the point here is that if we look towards the wage gap between men and women, is we look back when it first started happening. The main force, the drive between that is maternity leave. But if we look towards our society, that is not so much as common as we believe with and towards that aspect. So I believe that I think everyone should be equal, no matter, like I said, it doesn't matter who you are, but it matters how much you work. And if you work more harder because you're a guy or a girl, who cares? It matters on how much you work.
I was gonna say, actually comment on the same thing that Conrad says. Going off of what Gunnar said, there's too many variables, and they've all been researched. They're trying to find all the different variables that go into the reasoning and factoring behind what is considered the wage gap, and a big part of it is maternity leave. Unpaid maternity leave gets factored into those equations. So oftentimes, what they're measuring is annual salary rather than actual wage, because if a woman is on unpaid maternity leave, that's a significant portion of their time that they are not working and they are not making a wage. And then they factor that in and say, there's this gigantic wage gap. Oh no. It's the same thing with climate change. It's made out to be worse than it actually is.
Okay, I have a question this is for everybody. The following is completely legal and routinely practiced in the United States. Lobbyists write laws, then give money to politicians voting on those laws. Politicians take money from the industries they regulate. Special interests pay for politicians' vacations and lavish gifts. Politicians leave Congress, then take lucrative jobs as lobbyists. Politicians give tax breaks and corporate welfare to their funders. As president, what specific steps would you take to fix our corrupt political system? Gunnar?
Ultimately, I would inform the citizens of what exactly goes on behind the scenes of the political spectrum, and make them aware that politicians do these things, like take corrupted gifts from these PACs and special interest groups, and ultimately that's just the ultimate weapon to defeating these corrupt politicians, is knowing that their voters will check them on whether or not they're being corrupt.
Gunnar, have you taken special interest money in this election cycle?
I don't think so. I took NRA money, but that's...
So the very industry that you will then regulate?
Huh?
So this is the way I see it, right? Without all these special interest groups, the purpose is kind of been transformed into something that it shouldn't be. The purpose of them is to give, an average American, that works a middle-class job that has great ideas, that they're able to essentially invest into them, hoping that they would, in return, help, whatever the policies and everything. But that's not what it turns into. Now it's more bribery, where, hey, I'll give you this money if you change this law and whatever. And that's what it should be. It should be more of an investment in hoping that presidential candidate will go for your ideas. It shouldn't be something to be hated against, but it should be something that we can use against to help our democracy happen. Otherwise, we just have a country with a bunch of oligarchs.
Okay. Anyone else?
I was just going to say that, like I mentioned earlier, term limits. Another option that would go along well with that is also an amendment that would limit the topic of a bill being passed in the Senate or the House to one subject. A lot of these lobbyists attach random little one-liners to parts of the laws that allow for back holes and loopholes to be used later in the courts of law for different things that they do that the American people are not aware of. And by keeping bills at one subject, we can significantly reduce the amount of corruption there. And also, like I said, term limits would help keep the amount of corruption down, because I don't think the Founding Fathers ever intended for anyone to be a lifelong politician, especially not at the federal level.
Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I'm going to go back to what Conrad said. They need to be supervised during this exchanging period, because no one knows what's going on. The people don't know, and we can use our First Amendment right to let everyone know, so that we are not in a black hole and we don't know that what we're doing is wrong.
Going back to when you mentioned me with the NRA, You know, this is a class presidential debate, and I don't think I'm being very corrupted by the NRA. They are just funding me because we share similar interests, not because they're, yeah.
So this question comes from the Twitter. This is from Gabby, and she asks, "What is your approach to the major same-sex marriage, and how will you keep the peace between the LGBT and Christian communities?" Go ahead.
I think the root of that problem is inherently taxes. Married couples get a tax break for being married. If we had a flat tax with no deductions for anyone, that wouldn't be an issue. And so we wouldn't have to have government involvement in the issue of marriage. But if we got the government out of it, gay people can have their marriages, and straight people can have their marriages, and they would have nothing to do with each other, because it would be up to the individuals and the organizations that they're part of.
Good.
Okay, going back to what you said with there being like a tax incentive, I'm going to get married because I love someone, not because there's a tax incentive to getting
I
married.
didn't say there was a tax incentive. I said that they get a deduction.
Well,
That doesn't mean they're marrying for the deduction.
It could have been implied by the way you said it back then. But yeah, I'm for, you know, gay marriage. If you love someone, you might as well get married. You know, that's just, it's a bondage between two people. So.
Okay, thank you. Conrad?
So I like to look at things at both sides, right? So we have the conservatives over here that believe in strong marriage, or often have religious focuses, and that's where most of marriage came from, is from, you know, religions. And if you look on the other side, where we have you know, two people that really love each other, that feel like they should have the right to have the same equalities as both sides. And so definitely what I would want to support is that you still have the freedom of the First Amendment, where you can have your religion, you know, have heterosexual couples, you know, depending on whatever church or whatever religion. That's totally fine. But also on the same side, where we have more of, I guess, a civil union to call it, but essentially you can call it whatever you want, where you have the same the rights and responsibilities as a married couple.
Okay, so going back to like the foundation of marriage, it was like a Catholic principle, right? And then it spread to other religions. Now every religion, you know, almost every religion on the earth is practicing, you know, marriage between two couples. And I don't see why we can't expand that to apply to everyone.
Okay, so we're at the end of our allotted time. Before we quit today's debate, I would simply like you guys to go down and to reiterate in, say, 20, 30 seconds about why you should be elected president. We're going to go in the reverse order this time. Go ahead, Conrad.
Well, like I said, you know, I believe the Constitution is the way to go. We have a lot of problems in our country, and it's because we fight and we bicker and we believe that only one side's right. But in reality, there's a lot of similarity and differences between both sides. And if we can have that nonpartisan look and try to achieve an objective as not only as a country community, but as a world community, I believe we can make this place a better place.
All right, just for remembering on that ballot, I'm Gunnar Stone, and you know, I think that there is a lot of problems with you know, our government today, and we need to take a step back and look at it as like a whole and how the whole system works together. We need to remember that ISIS is a threat. You know, football games. Remember ISIS, guys. They're coming for us. And gun control, you know, that's a big problem too. And education, we didn't really talk about it in this debate, but it needs to be looked at.
Okay, thank you.
All right, my name is Leonardo Porter. Okay, so we do really need to take a step back, and we need to look at our economy and help everybody become better. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Kevin Tyler, and I'm the best candidate for the job because I'd work with Congress to get tax reform, education reform, reform on the military, and reform in lots of different places. I'd fight corruption in the Senate and the Congress. And those are things that the average American, they're looking for that. And, you know, on both sides of the political aisle, everyone's looking to end the corruption. And I think that I'm the best qualified to make that happen.
Okay, everybody, you just saw democracy in action. Give them a hand.